The station floated in the darkness between stars. It was called Vela Prime, and it was the largest structure ever built by living hands. 12 races had come together to create it thousands of years ago. It was neutral ground, a place where enemies could speak without weapons, a place where the galaxy made its biggest decisions. Today, the Great Hall was full. Representatives from every elder race sat in their assigned places. The Keth were there, tall and thin, with skin like pale marble and eyes that glowed soft blue. They could touch minds and move objects with thought alone. The Oran were there too, massive creatures covered in thick scales, each one standing 3 meters tall. They had conquered 100 worlds through strength alone. The Mavari sat in the shadows, as they always did. No one knew what they truly looked like. They were assassins and spies, and they preferred it that way. There were 9 other races as well. Each one was ancient. Each one was powerful. And each one was afraid. The High Speaker of the Keth rose from his seat. His name was Ren, and he had lived for 600 years. His voice carried across the hall without effort. "We all know why we are here," he said. "The Hollow has taken 17 systems in the last cycle. 3 of those systems belonged to council races. Billions are dead. Billions more will follow." No one spoke. The Hollow was not like other enemies. It was not an army or an empire. It was a hunger, a living infection that spread from world to world, consuming everything it touched. It ate cities. It ate oceans. It ate the very ground beneath your feet. And worst of all, it learned. Every weapon used against it made it stronger. Every tactic was studied and defeated. "We must act together," Ren continued. "Each race will send their greatest champions. Our combined strength is the only hope we have." One by one, the races made their pledges. The Keth would send 2,000 psionic warriors, their minds trained to kill with a single thought. The Oran would send their war titans, genetically engineered giants carrying weapons that could crack mountains. The Mavari would send their shadow corps, 500 assassins who had never failed a mission in recorded. History. The pledges continued. Armies, fleets, super soldiers, planet killers. The combined force would be the largest military gathering in galactic history. Then Ren turned to the small delegation at the far end of the hall. They were easy to miss. Just 3 figures sitting quietly in simple clothes. "And what of the humans?" Ren asked. There was doubt in his voice. Humanity was the youngest race in the council. They had only discovered space travel 2 centuries ago. They were small, weak, and short-lived. Most races did not take them seriously. The human ambassador stood. Her name was Unipark. She was a small woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She looked around the great hall without fear. "Humanity has received the council's request," she said. "We understand the threat. We have made our decision." "And what forces will Earth contribute?" Ren asked. Una smiled softly. "We will send 1 soldier." Silence filled the hall. Then laughter. The Oran commander pounded his fist on the table, his deep voice booming with amusement. Several Keth shook their heads in disbelief. Even the Mavari, hidden in their shadows, made sounds of mockery. "1 soldier?" Ren said. His glowing eyes narrowed. "The Hollow consumes worlds, Ambassador. It has destroyed civilizations older than your entire species. And you offer us 1 soldier?" "Yes," Una said. She did not seem bothered by the laughter. "This is an insult," the Oran commander growled. "Humanity mocks us." "No," Una replied. "We simply understand the situation differently." Ren leaned forward. "Then explain it to us, Ambassador. Help us understand why 1 human life is worth the armies we have pledged." Una looked at him steadily. "You asked for our best. We are sending our best. Your best is one soldier? Our best is enough. The laughter had stopped now. Something in her voice made the hall grow quiet. There was no pride in her words. No boasting. Just simple certainty, like someone stating that water was wet or that stars burned bright. Ren stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. Your arrogance will doom your people, Ambassador. When the Hollow comes for Earth, you will wish you had taken this seriously. Yuna said nothing. She simply sat back down, her hands folded in her lap. 3 days passed. The Allied forces gathered in Velaprime's massive hangar. Ships from a dozen worlds filled the space, their designs strange and beautiful. Soldiers trained and prepared. Commanders argued over strategy, and everyone waited for humanity's contribution to arrive. When the drop pod finally came, it was almost missed entirely. A small metal container, barely large enough for 2 people, falling from a human transport ship. It landed in the corner of the hangar with a heavy thud. The armies stopped to watch. Even the Oran Titans turned their massive heads. The pod door opened with a hiss of steam. A man stepped out. He was not impressive. He was not tall or muscular. He looked to be in his late 40s, with gray hair at his temples and lines on his face. He wore simple combat fatigues, faded and patched in several places. On his back was a worn rifle. In his hand was a duffel bag. He had no armor, no enhancements, no visible technology beyond what a human soldier might have carried centuries ago. He looked around the hangar at the gathered armies of the galaxy. Thousands of the most powerful warriors ever assembled stared back at him. He scratched the back of his neck and sighed. Long trip, he muttered to no one in particular. Ren approached him, disbelief plain on his alien face. You are humanity's champion? Their greatest warrior? The man looked up at the towering Keth. He did not seem intimidated. Name's Kim Taho, Sergeant, Republic of Korea Army, 3rd Infantry Division. He shifted his duffel bag to his other hand. Someone want to show me where I'm bunking? Ren turned to Ambassador Yuna, who had followed the sergeant into the hangar. This is a joke, Ren said. It must be. Yuna watched Taho walk toward the barracks, his warm boots echoing in the massive space. You asked for our best, she said again. We sent him. And somewhere in the back of her eyes, there was something that looked almost like pity. But it was not for humanity. It was for everyone else. The planet was called Asira 6. It had once been beautiful. Blue forests had covered its surface. Crystal rivers had flowed through valleys of white stone. 3 billion people had called it home. Now half of it was dead. The Hollow had come 6 months ago, and it had spread like a disease across the land. Where it touched, nothing remained. No trees, no water, no life. Just gray dust and the twisted shapes of things that used to be alive. The Allied forces landed on the planet's last clean continent. 10,000 warriors from 12 races, carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. They set up their camps and prepared for war. Taiho was assigned to the rear. The commanders did not trust him. They did not want him. He was a distraction at best, a liability at worst. So they put him with the supply units and told him to stay out of the way. He did not argue. He simply found a quiet corner, cleaned his rifle, and watched. The first assault began at dawn. The Keth warriors led the charge, their minds reaching out like invisible blades. Hollow drones fell by the hundreds, their nervous systems torn apart by pure thought. The Oran Titans followed, their massive weapons turning enemy clusters into craters. The Mavari slipped through the chaos like ghosts, striking at command nodes and vanishing before they could be seen. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The combined might of the galaxy working as one. For a moment, it seemed like victory was certain, but the Hollow learned by nightfall, everything had changed. The drones had adapted. Their neural patterns shifted, becoming resistant to psionic attacks. The Keth warriors pushed harder, burning out their own minds trying to break through. Some collapsed, some died. The rest fell back in confusion. The Titans faced a different problem. The Hollow had studied their weapons. It knew the frequency of their energy beams, the yield of their explosives. New drones appeared with shells that absorbed the attacks harmlessly. For the first time in living memory, Oran warriors died in large numbers. The Mavari had it worst of all. The Hollow had learned to sense them. 500 assassins entered the infected zone at sunset. By midnight, their signals went dark one by one. None of them came back. Panic spread through the camp. The soldiers had expected a hard fight. They had not expected to be outmatched so quickly. Tejo watched it all from his corner. He ate his rations slowly. He checked his equipment. When the screening started in the night, he did not flinch. Around 3 in the morning, he stood up. He put on his pack and picked up his rifle. A young Keth officer noticed him moving toward the perimeter. "Where are you going, human?" "For a walk," Tejo said. "The fallen district is that way. It is overrun. You will die. Maybe." He walked into the darkness alone. The commanders noticed his absence an hour later. They tracked his biosigns on their equipment, watching the small dot move deeper into enemy territory. Most of them expected it to disappear like the Mavari signals had. It did not. The dot kept moving, slowly, steadily. Through the heart of the infected zone. Dawn came. The surviving forces gathered to plan their retreat. There was no shame in it, they told themselves. They had tried. They had learned. They would come back with better weapons and new strategies. Then the reports started coming in. The eastern nest was silent. No movement. No signals. Scouts sent to investigate found hundreds of dead drones. Their bodies were burned. Their nerve cores had been ripped out by hand. An hour later, Tejo walked back into camp. He looked terrible. His uniform was torn and stained with fluids that were not his own. Burns covered his arms. A deep cut ran across his forehead, dried blood caking one side of his face. In his left hand, he dragged a cluster of nerve cores tied together with wire. There were at least 30 of them. He dropped them at the feet of Commander Vex, the scarred Oran general who led the ground forces. "Those were their command notes," Tejo said. "They won't coordinate attacks from that sector anymore." Vex stared down at the human. The Oran was 3 times his size. He had fought in wars across the galaxy. He had killed thousands. But something about this small, bleeding creature made him feel uncertain. "How?" Vex asked. "How did you do this alone? Our finest warriors could not." Tejo pulled out a cigarette. His hands were steady despite the wounds. He lit it and took a long drag before answering. "Your warriors are impressive," he said. "Big, powerful, advanced, but you fight like you expect to win. You fight like losing is something that happens to other people." He blew out smoke and looked at the bodies being carried back to camp. The Keth, the Oran, the spaces where the Mavari should have been. Humans don't fight like that. We've been fighting things that want to kill us since we crawled out of the mud on our homeworld. Before we had fire, before we had tools, when we were small and weak and everything around us was bigger and stronger. He tapped ash from his cigarette. We didn't survive because we were the best. We survived because we never stopped. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were more stubborn than anything that tried to kill us. Vex was silent for a long moment. Around them, soldiers from a dozen worlds had stopped to listen. "What did you use?" The commander finally asked. "What weapon killed so many?" Tejo shrugged. "Fire, mostly. Some explosives I made from cleaning supplies. A knife when things got close." He held up his rifle. "Only used 6 bullets. Didn't want to waste them." He started walking toward the medical tent. then paused and looked back. The hollow is smart. It learns fast. But it's still just a predator. And my people have been killing predators for 200,000 years. He took another drag of his cigarette. We got good at it. He walked away, leaving the commanders to stare at each other in silence. The greatest warriors in the galaxy, with their armies and their fleets and their ancient technologies, and one tired human with a worn rifle and a cigarette. For the first time since the war began, they started to wonder if they had been thinking about this wrong from the very start. The war dragged on. Days became weeks. The Allied forces pushed forward, then were pushed back. They took ground, then lost it again. The hollow was patient. It did not need to win quickly. It just needed to keep learning. The armies of the galaxy grew smaller. Every battle cost them warriors they could not replace. Ships that had traveled across the stars were now burning wreckage on an alien world. Morale crumbled like old stone. But through it all, there was Tejo. The soldiers began to watch him. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became something else. Something like wonder. He did not sleep. Not the way they did. An Iran warrior needed 6 hours of rest to function. A Keth required deep meditation to restore their mental energy. Tejo went 3 days without closing his eyes. When someone asked how he was still standing, he just said he had done worse during something called basic training. He ate everything. The rations meant for Iran soldiers were dense blocks of protein and minerals, designed for creatures with 3 stomachs. Tejo ate them like snacks. He complained that they were bland and asked if anyone had hot sauce. No one knew what hot sauce was. He took wounds that should have killed him. In one battle, a hollow drone drove a spike through his shoulder. He pulled it out himself, wrapped the wound with tape he had in his pocket, and kept fighting. A Keth medic examined him later and said the spike had missed his heart by 2 centimeters. Tejo said he had been lucky and asked for painkillers so he could go back out. The aliens did not understand. Their bodies were stronger than his. Their technology was better. Their lifespans were longer. But none of them could do what he did. None of them could take so much punishment and keep moving forward like it meant nothing. One of the Keth commanders, a female named Sarah, asked him about it directly. "Your body is damaged," she said. "Your muscles are torn. Your bones are cracked. Why do you not rest?" Tejo was cleaning his rifle. He did this every night, no matter how tired he was. "Resting means stopping," he said. "Stopping means thinking. Thinking means remembering." He did not explain what he meant. He did not need to. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something old and deep. A pain that had nothing to do with physical wounds. She did not ask again. The breaking point came 3 weeks into the campaign. A scouting unit was ambushed deep in enemy territory. Most of them died in the first minutes. But one signal remained active. A young Keth warrior named Nira, trapped in a collapsed building, surrounded by hollow drones. The commanders looked at the map and made their calculations. The rescue route was too dangerous. The enemy presence was too thick. The chances of success were less than 3%. They decided to mark her as lost and focus on defending their main position. Tejo was there when they made the call. He listened to their reasoning. He watched them draw lines on their tactical displays. Then he stood up and walked toward the armory. Commander Vex stopped him. "Where are you going, human?" "To get her. The commanders have made their decision. She is lost. She's still breathing. The odds of survival are, I don't care about odds." Vex stepped in front of him, his massive body blocking the way. "This is foolish. You will die for nothing. One life is not worth the risk." Tejo looked up at the giant alien. There was no anger in his face, just certainty. "Where I come from, we have a saying. We don't leave people behind." He stepped around Vex. "She's still breathing. That's enough. He walked into the darkness with a knife, a pistol, and 2 grenades. Nothing else. The commanders watched his signal move toward the enemy zone and waited for it to disappear. 6 hours passed. 6 hours of silence. 6 hours of watching that small dot move through hell. Then the signal started coming back. When Taeho walked into camp, he was carrying Nira over his shoulder. His left arm hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. Burns covered his chest where enemy acid had eaten through his vest. Blood ran down his face from a wound he had not bothered to cover. But Nira was alive. Unconscious and wounded, but alive. He set her down gently on a medical stretcher. Then he turned to the nearest medic. She's got internal bleeding. Her 3rd lung is collapsed. And something hit her spine, so be careful when you move her. He said all of this calmly, like he was reading a shopping list. Then he looked down at his broken arm. Also, I need someone to set this. And maybe some of those painkillers. He sat down heavily on a supply crate. Around him, the camp had gone silent. Thousands of soldiers from across the galaxy stared at the small human who had done the impossible. Again. 3 days later, Nira woke up. The first thing she did was ask for the human who saved her. They brought Taeho to her medical tent. His arm was in a cast. New bandages covered his burns. But he was already preparing to go back out. Why? Nira asked him. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were intense. Why did you come for me? The commander said I was lost. The calculations said I was dead. Why did you risk yourself? Taeho sat down beside her bed. He was quiet for a long moment. Calculations are just numbers, he finally said. They tell you what should happen. They don't tell you what has to happen. But you could have died. Yes. And that did not stop you? No. Why? He looked at her with those tired, old eyes. Eyes that had seen too much and carried too much. Because you were still breathing, he said simply. And as long as someone is still breathing, there's a chance. Maybe a small one. Maybe almost nothing. But humans don't believe in almost nothing. We believe in trying anyway. Nira stared at him. In that moment, she understood something that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to learn. Humans did not calculate acceptable losses. They refused to accept any losses at all. They would walk through fire and darkness and death itself, not because they were sure they would win, but because giving up was simply not something they knew how to do. It was not strategy. It was not logic. It was something deeper, something that had been burned into them through millions of years of struggling to survive on a world that wanted them dead. It was stubbornness. It was love. It was the refusal to let go of hope, no matter how small, and it was terrifying. The discovery came on a cold morning. Deep scans had finally penetrated the planet's crust, and what they found changed everything. The hollow was not just spreading across the surface. It was growing from below. 3 kilometers beneath the ground, in a cavern the size of a city, lay the Queen Core, the heart of the hive. The brain that controlled every drone, every nest, every tendril of the infection. If it was destroyed, the entire hollow network would collapse. The commanders gathered to plan the final assault. The tunnel systems leading down were narrow and twisted. The hollow had filled them with traps and defenders. It knew they were coming. We estimate 40% casualties, Commander Vex said, looking at the tactical display. Possibly higher. But there is no other choice. We must send our forces underground. The other commanders nodded grimly. They'd all lost so much already. What was a little more death in the name of victory? Taeho stood at the back of the room. He had been listening quietly, as he always did. Now he stepped forward. Don't send them, he said. Vex turned to look at him. What do you suggest, human? That we simply give up? No, I'll go alone. Silence. The kind of silence that falls when someone says something that makes no sense. Ren, the HFY speaker, was the first to respond. He had changed in the weeks since the war began. He no longer looked at Taeho with contempt. Now, there was something else in his glowing eyes. Something that might have been respect. "You cannot be serious," Ren said. "The tunnels are a death trap. Thousands of our warriors would die trying to reach the Queen Core. And you want to go alone?" "Yes, why?" Taeho did not answer immediately. He looked around the room at the faces of the commanders. Alien faces, strange and unfamiliar. But he had fought beside their soldiers for weeks now. He had watched them die. He had carried their wounded. In some strange way, they had become his responsibility. "Because if I fail, you'll still have your armies," he said. "You can try again. Find another way. But if you send everyone down there, and it goes wrong, there's nothing left. And if you succeed?" Taeho shrugged. "Then the war is over and everyone goes home. The odds of success are, I told you before." "I don't care about odds." Ren stepped forward. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, to stop this madness. But then he stopped himself. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why do you keep doing this? You are one human, one small, fragile creature. The galaxy owes you nothing. You owe us nothing. Why do you keep walking into death?" Taeho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than anyone had ever heard it, because someone has to. He turned and walked toward the equipment bay. The commanders watched him go. None of them tried to stop him. An hour later, Taeho stood at the entrance to the tunnel system. He carried a pack filled with explosives. Enough to level a city block, the engineer said. On his belt was his pistol. In his hand was his rifle. And strapped to his leg was a combat knife with a worn handle. Nira came to see him off. She was still weak, still healing, but she had insisted on being there. "You saved my life," she said. "Let me come with you." Taeho shook his head. "No, you need to stay here." "Why?" "Because someone needs to tell the story. If I don't come back, someone needs to remember." He looked at her with those tired eyes. For a moment, the mask he always wore seemed to slip. "Humans don't live very long," he said. "Not compared to your people. 100 years if we're lucky. Most of us don't even get that. So we learn to make our time matter. We learn to do things worth remembering." He turned toward the darkness of the tunnel. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humans don't give up. That we don't stop fighting. That we carry the people we love with us, even when they're gone." He stepped into the darkness and disappeared. 12 hours of silence followed. The surface forces could not track him underground. They could not help him. They could only wait. Some prayed. Others paced. The commanders stared at their displays, watching for any sign. Then the ground shook. It was not a small tremor. It was a convulsion that knocked soldiers off their feet across the entire continent. Deep beneath the surface, something massive had been destroyed. And then, all at once, the hollow stopped. Drones that had been advancing collapsed where they stood. Nests that had been pulsing with activity went dark. The hive link that connected every part of the infection simply ceased to exist. The Queen Core was dead. Rescue teams rushed into the tunnels. They followed the path of destruction Taeho had left behind. Burned drones, collapsed passages, shell casings and blood, and the marks of a battle fought against impossible odds. They found him 3 kilometers below the surface. He was buried under rubble, near the shattered remains of the Queen Core. His body was broken in more ways than the medics could count. His heartbeat was so faint, it was barely there. But he was alive. Beside him lay his combat knife. It was buried in the core's central nerve cluster, driven in by hand when his explosives had not been enough. Someone pulled the knife free and looked at the handle. There were words carved into it in human script. They later learned it was Korean. The name was Sujin. When Taeho finally woke up, 3 days later, he was on a medical ship heading back to Viola Prime. Ambassador Yuna sat beside his bed. "They're calling you a hero," she said softly. Taeho turned his head slowly. His body was wrapped in bandages. Machines beeped and hummed around him. "The knife," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Do you have it?" Yuna reached into her coat and pulled it out. She placed it gently in his hand. He held it close to his chest and closed his eyes. "Sujin was your daughter," Yuna said. It was not a question. "She was 11, Taeho said. "The first hollow attack on a human colony. I wasn't there. I was halfway across the galaxy when they took her from me." Tears ran down his face. The first tears anyone had ever seen him shed. "I couldn't save her," he whispered. "So I carry her with me into every battle, every fight, every dark place I walk into." He opened his eyes and looked at the knife. "She's the reason I keep going. She's the reason I don't stop." Yuna said nothing. There was nothing to say. She simply sat with him in the silence while the stars passed by outside, and a father held the only piece of his daughter he had left. The war was over. The hollow died with its queen, and the galaxy breathed again for the first time in years. On Osiris 6, the gray dust began to fade. Seeds that had survived underground started to push through the soil. The planet would live. It would take centuries to heal, but it would live. The Galactic Council gathered at Vila Prime one final time. The Great Hall was filled again, but it felt different now. The empty seats were everywhere. So many had been lost. So many would never come home. The ceremony was meant to honor the champions who had saved the galaxy. Each race would present their medals and their monuments. They would speak the names of the dead and carve them into eternal stone. The Keth went first. Ren stood at the podium and spoke of his people's sacrifice. 2,000 warriors had gone to Osiris 6. Less than 400 had returned. He unveiled a crystal monument that would stand in their capital for 10,000 years. The Oran followed. Commander Vex honored his fallen titans. Each name read aloud while holographic images of the dead floated above the assembly. Their monument was a mountain carved from the rock of their homeworld. One by one, the races paid their respects, statues, temples, songs, poems. The galaxy remembered its heroes in 1,000 different ways. Then it was humanity's turn. Ambassador Yuna walked to the podium alone. She was small against the vastness of the hall, but she did not seem small. She stood straight and looked out at the gathered races. The other delegates waited. They expected something grand. A monument to match the ones that had come before. A speech about human glory and human strength. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "We don't celebrate war," she said. "Where I come from, we don't build monuments to battles. We don't carve names in stone so they can last forever. We know that nothing lasts forever. Not stone. Not memory. Not memory. Not even stars." She paused. Humans remember differently. We remember by living, by carrying the ones we lost inside us, by telling their stories to our children and their children after them. Not in temples, not in crystals, but in the quiet moments, at dinner tables and bedsides. In the small hours of the night when we can still hear their voices. She looked around the hall. "You asked us for armies. We sent you one man. And now you want to know why. You want to understand what makes humans different." She smiled softly. "The truth is, Taeho is not special. Not by human standards. He is a father who lost his child. He is a soldier who has seen too many friends die. He is a man who wakes up every morning with nothing but the choice to keep going or to stop. And every morning, he chooses to keep going. She let that sink in. On Earth, there are 8 billion people. 8 billion stories of loss and love and struggle. 8 billion reasons to give up, and 8 billion choices to try anyway. Tejo is not unique. He is simply human. And humans have been choosing to fight, to survive, to refuse to quit, since the beginning of our existence. She stepped back from the podium. We did not send you our greatest warrior. We sent you something more dangerous. We sent you someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Someone who did not fight to win, but because fighting was the only thing he knew how to do. She bowed her head. We offer no monuments. We offer no statues. We offer only this. The knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, there is a species that will never stop, that will never surrender, that will walk into darkness again and again, for no other reason than because the darkness is there and someone has to face it. She turned and walked back to her seat. The hall was silent. After the ceremony, the delegates looked for Sergeant Kim Taho. They wanted to meet him, to thank him, to ask him questions about humanity and strength and sacrifice. He was not there, he had refused all honors, all medals, all monuments. When the council had offered him anything he wanted, he had asked for only one thing, a transport ship back to Earth. He was already gone. The ship took him across the stars, past the worlds he had helped save, through the empty spaces between galaxies. He did not watch the view. He sat in his cabin, holding the knife with his daughter's name, and waited for home. Earth came into view on the third day, blue and green and alive. The planet that had given birth to humanity. The place where everything had started. He landed in Korea, in a city called Bisan. There was no crowd waiting for him. No parade. Just an empty landing pad and a gray sky and the sound of seagulls in the distance. He walked through the streets alone, past shops and restaurants and people living their ordinary lives. No one recognized him. No one knew what he had done. He found his way to a small house on a quiet street. The paint was peeling. The garden was overgrown. He had not been home in years. Inside, everything was covered in dust. The furniture, the dishes in the kitchen, the photographs on the walls. He walked to a small shelf in the living room. There was a picture frame there, face down. He picked it up and turned it over. A girl smiled back at him. 11 years old. Bright eyes and messy hair and a gap-toothed grin. His daughter. His Su-Jin. He held the picture against his chest and sat down on the old couch. For a long time, he did not move. He just sat there in the silence of the empty house, holding on to what was left of his world. Outside, the sun began to set. Golden light spilled through the dirty windows. The house creaked and settled, the way old houses do. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the races of the council were building their monuments. They were carving names in crystal and stone. They were writing songs that would echo through the ages. But the truest memorial was here, in this small house, in this quiet moment. A father holding a picture of his daughter, keeping her memory alive in the only way that mattered. In the years that followed, a saying spread among the stars. When young warriors asked how one human had done the impossible, the elders would tell them, never measure humans by their numbers. Measure them by what they carry inside. And across the cosmos, in academy halls and military schools, the story was taught. The story of the war that almost ended the galaxy. The story of the armies that failed and the soldier who did not. The story of a species that refused to stop, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. They called it the lesson of Earth, and the lesson was simple. The galaxy sent its best. Humans sent enough.